Welcome to the Building a Safer Evansville LGBTQ Learning Series, session 3 of 6 on the history and importance of LGBTQ pride. Before we begin, there are a couple of ground rules. This is an open and safe space. Questions are welcomed. We will do our best to answer any questions you might have, either in the comments below or send us an email, and we'd be happy to answer them for you. And content warnings will be issued when dealing with sensitive topics or terminology. Content warnings for today include discussions of violence and repression. Today's takeaway: do I understand the importance of pride? Do I know ways that I can support pride in Evansville? And can I recognize specific actions being taken by state or local leaders to show support for LGBTQ in my community? Activity being, how can your organization support pride events in Evansville? So what does this mean for our coalition? It means supporting local pride events. It means promoting Evansville as an LGBTQ affirming city, not just during the month of June, but throughout the entire year. It means engaging the community, and honestly, one of the most important things is learning the history of LGBTQ pride. So what is pride? Pride is the promotion of the self-affirmation, dignity, equality, and increased visibility of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and plus people as a social group. It's being proud of LGBTQ people. It also means having celebrations and discussing the history and past of LGBTQ So there are two kind of big ways to discuss about this: is pre-Stonewall and post-Stonewall. Pre-Stonewall, Stonewall being a monumental event we'll talk about in just a minute, but pre-Stonewall being before the modern movement happens. This goes like in the history, the past of America, and what it meant to be LGBTQ then, as well as post-Stonewall after this monumental event happened, and where the modern LGBTQ rights movement came from. So pre-Stonewall, a couple of big things. 1924 gay rights organization, the Society for Human Rights, was founded. They are the first and most notable society and organization that fought for gay rights in America. 1924 was pretty decent a long time ago for a lot of us, but still relatively fresh in terms of what the country's been doing. 1952, homosexuality was officially classified as a mental illness by the American Psychiatric Association. In 1953, an executive order banning homosexuals from working for federal government was legally put into place, and that meant that there was a federal ban on, being homosexual. Made it totally illegal to discriminate against somebody for being LGBTQ+. Prior to 1961, sodomy was a felony in every single state, punishable by a lengthy term of imprisonment and or hard labor. So being LGBTQ+ was not super friendly. This does lead into the 1960s, when you start seeing a lot of cultural change, massive social upheaval, protests, resistance, counterculture popping up all across the country, from California to New York. And one of the most prominent places that you saw this counterculture happened was in Greenwich Village in New York, where there were a lot of notable gay bars, none more notable really necessarily than Stonewall Inn. I feel like everybody who knows about modern LGBTQ rights movement could tell you about Stonewall, some way, shape, or form, because this is really where things shifted from being a repressive culture to an out and about monumental change for the current LGBTQ pride movement. June 28th, 1969, police raided Stonewall Inn, a gay bar in Greenwich Village. They had been working as a gay bar for quite some time. It was a prominent gay and lesbian bar for members of the Greenwich Village community. Other members of New York came here. And so it was well known that it was a gay bar. It wasn't legally classified as one, but police took their opportunity to raid not only Stonewall, but many of the other gay bars in the area. And when Stonewall was shut down on June 28th, people really didn't like that. Members of the LGBTQ community started rallying around it. They showed up in force. They started, what started as 10 people originally moved to 100 people. And then by July 3rd was over 1,000 people who were protesting against the police violence and the abuse of power against somebody for being gay. July 3rd, 1969 officially marked the end of the police raid, the rioting, and the violence. A lot of destruction had been caused. It was a pretty huge event. It was covered nationally, and it's widely considered the most important moment in the modern U.S. LGBTQ plus movement, which triggered a whole bunch of other things. After Stonewall, the first Pride Parade was held the next year in 1970. It was kind of considered an anniversary, and because it was such a monumental movement, people wanted to celebrate it. By 1973, the APA had removed homosexuality from its list of mental illnesses. In 1982, Wisconsin became the first state in the country to have laws that outlawed discrimination based on sexual orientation. First state in the country to do that. Massive, massive change. Even in that 12-year period, you saw huge stuff like that happen. In the 1980s, more Pride was being held across the country in multiple cities. It used to be called Gay Liberation, Gay Association, had a whole variety of different names, but in the 1980s, it kind of coalesced under Gay Pride. And you started seeing that happen all across the country. More of the sexual orientation discrimination was being put into place across the states. Massive change. But we start to see a little bit different at the federal level. 1996, the Defense of Marriage Act was signed into law outlawing effectively marriage between same-sex couples. But in 2004, Massachusetts became the first state to legalize same-sex marriage. And then in 2015, same-sex marriage was legalized nationwide following a Supreme Court decision. In 2019 was the 50-year anniversary of the Stonewall riots. And a couple of days before filming this presentation, the Supreme Court made it illegal to fire somebody for being LGBTQ+. So in a 50-year period, there has been massive, massive monumental change, both across each of the individual states, but then nationwide as well, which kind of brings us to our modern day celebration of Pride. And here in Wisconsin, 1977, we've got a couple of other, pretty notable things that happened in our state. 1977, Jim Yeadon was elected to Madison City Council, and he was the first openly gay city councilor that was elected in the entire country. Pretty monumental for our state, again, to then lead the way with 1982 being the first state to outlaw discrimination based on sexual orientation. 1999, Tammy Baldwin was elected to Congress and eventually becomes the first openly gay senator to be elected and work in Congress. 2018, conversion therapy is outlawed by 9 jurisdictions in our state. Then 2019, Governor Evers issued an executive order prohibiting discrimination based on gender identity for government employment. 2 counties and 7 cities followed suit. Some ways to celebrate Pride. Not every single Pride celebration is going to be the exact same. Evansville is not going to be the same as Madison or Chicago, LA, or New York, and we have to figure out the ways to celebrate Pride best based on our city's needs and wants. Some ways to celebrate Pride include Pride parades, readings, art exhibitions, and film festivals by notable LGBTQ plus authors, artists, and filmmakers, encouraging local community members to get involved and showcase what it means to be LGBTQ plus here in Evansville, make it a culturally local and celebratory thing at the same time. Encourage that engagement with your local community and not just say, we're going to stamp a rainbow flag on it and call it good. Do what you can to build those roots with the LGBTQ plus community here in our town. Other week-long events, anything that you can think of to celebrate Pride that shows off that you're an inclusive and welcoming city is monumental. It's huge. It's where you really want to go. Engage with that community, figure out what they want, figure out what they need, and then go from there. Please remember these 4 things: that we're growing, that the history of Pride is just as important as the celebration itself. We have to provide context and ask questions. When I say we're growing, this is a chance to grow and build Evansville into a more welcoming place to live, not just based on how we feel that we need it to be, but how members of the LGBTQ plus community are asking themselves. So if somebody says that you need to do something different, or they wouldn't like you to do this, or they'd like you to do something else to help celebrate Pride, listen, engage, and build from that. The history of Pride is more than just a reason to party. Pride events are not just some kind of thing to suit up and have a parade down Main Street. It's to honor the past history of LGBTQ plus and the past history of LGBTQ plus here in Evansville as well. And it provides context. Pride, it started as a political riot, basically. We need to help provide that political voice and discussion to this LGBTQ plus community, both here in Evansville and as a whole. And most importantly, I think, is to ask questions. If you don't know what kind of celebration the LGBTQ plus community wants or needs here in Evansville, you should ask. Engage those members, get them involved in the planning, because this is the time for them to engage and grow and build a pride that they want to be a part of. Ask those questions always. That's, I mean, you know that. That's my motto for every single one of these videos so far, is ask questions. So today's activity, how can you support Pride in Evansville? What resources does your organization have to offer? What community resources can your organization turn to? And we want you to develop a basic plan for your organization to participate in a Pride event in June, either coming up with ideas for Pride events here in June, or ways that you might be able to participate in some of the existing Pride parades, art exhibits, film festivals, etc. How can your organization become part of Pride here in Evansville? If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please email us at baseevansville@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. If there's something that you weren't super sure on in today's presentation, you just wanted to say thank you for putting this on, or if you feel like there's something that's missing from this presentation, please, please, please email us. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your time today. It's been really wonderful. We hope that this becomes something that you can find useful for your organization, and we hope to see you next time. Thank you. Bye.